All right, let's get started. And I guess our first thing would be again creating our first application with React. And when I say first, obviously this would be our first project. You could technically work in the tutorial. However, I would encourage you to again go through the steps because this is just going to get you way more comfortable working with Create React App, setting up your project, and all the other stuff. So first and foremost, I will going to open up the terminal and we will going to zoom in again just so we can see everything better. We're going to navigate to the desktop. However, again, you can create your project where you would like, but I'm going to say CD desktop. So now I'm going to be in the desktop and let's write again, create React app. And now I'm going to be, let's say, creating person list. Again, this is going to bootstrap all our application. Since it takes a while, I'm going to resume the video once all the dependencies have been installed. Excellent. All our dependencies have been installed, as well as we obviously have our folder. So now our next task would be opening up either a new window or just in general our text editor, and then we can just drag and drop it, and our folder is going to be ready to go. I don't know which version are you using. I mean, sorry, not version. Which option are you using? Whether you're running your commands from the terminal or you're using the integrated terminal. Since I am using the integrated terminal, I'm just going to set up again new window because I will going to be placing side by side. So I'm going to set my code editor as well as the new browser window, and then we're going to run our npm start. So I'm going to do this from my integrated terminal, npm start. This is going to open up my terminal. However, I also would like to show you that I'm going to have this one side by side. So this is going to be the bigger window where I'm just going to show you what we're going to be doing, because in that case, I think this is just going to help our development. We're still going to go the drastic way. We're all going to be deleting a lot of stuff since we haven't covered the imports and exports. However, the moment we're going to be done with this video, don't worry, we're going to start learning about imports and exports. So don't think that each and every time we're going to be deleting everything. However, since this is a bootstrapped application, meaning there is some pre-configurations, a lot of times we will going to be deleting at least something. But however, in this case, we're going to get rid of the app CSS and app.js. We don't need it. Then we're going to have the error, of course. Then we're also going to delete the logo SVG. We don't need it. We're going to delete everything at the moment that we had in the index CSS. We don't need this as well. And in the index.js as well, we're going to do the similar thing. We're going to delete everything and we're going to have a fresh new application. Now, remember, in order to set everything up with our component, we first needed our imports. So first, we're going to start with React, and we're going to be looking from the React dependency. So that was the first thing. Now, I'm going to copy and paste the line, and I'm going to say that I'm going to be looking for my second dependency, which would be React DOM. And you know what? By the way, I'm going to close this right now. I'm going to say that I'm going to have no sidebar, as well as I'm going to get rid of the terminal because I don't think we need it right now. And I'm going to say that this would be from the React DOM. So those would be my imports. And right away, I also would like to do the render. So I'm going to say React DOM, and then we're going to use the render method. And if you remember, we needed to do two things. We needed to render something, so some kind of component, which in our case is going to be person list. We obviously haven't created it yet, but we're going to do it in a second, as well as I would need to set it up where I would want to render it. And in this case, I needed to use document, get element by ID. And if you remember correctly, that was get element by ID root. However, we do need to create this component. So I'm going to say const person list. And in this case, I will going to start using right away the arrow functions, which come from ES6, because I think we have covered enough times ES5 way where we are having just a normal function, the regular function. So this would be the arrow function. And here we're going to be passing, I don't know, some kind of return. Very simple. Let's just write return. Then there's going to be a few lines. So I'm going to write right away section. And then within the section, again, this is just going to be my content will be here. I'm going to save it. And then obviously this is going to be complaining because I'm not using the same variable name. So that is going to be a very good lesson for us. If we're naming this with the name port, something like React DOM with all uppercases, as far as DOM is concerned, we also need to do the same thing over here. So let me save it. And now everything is working fine where I have my content goes here. Awesome. We're making a excellent progress. So now what we're looking for? Well, as I'm looking at the project, what do I have? So I have obviously some kind of person list that's going to be rendering the people. And then for each and every list item, this obviously would be some kind of person component. And what is going to be in a person component? We're going to have some image. We're going to have the name, as well as we're going to have the occupation. And for some of them, we're going to have children, more specifically for one of them. Okay. So why don't we do this? Why don't we create the component? Let's say, first of all, const, and we're going to write just person. And for now, let's maybe not pass anything here. Let's just say that we're not passing any kind of props or anything like that, as well as we're just going to render something out. So we're going to say, okay, so there's going to be return. I'm going to write the explicit return. And in this case, I'm going to say return. And now what I'm returning. I think that since there's going to be multiple lines, we can go right away with article. And within the article, we're going to first start with an image, but the image will going to be, again, getting online. So we need to head over back to the random user. And as we're scrolling down, again, there's a lot of information here. And I have used this, by the way, for my JavaScript courses and all that, where we're getting the API information. But in our case, this is very simple. We just know that we're going to be looking for some kind of image. And I already know that I would want a thumbnail image, so I don't want a big one. And I'm just going to copy and paste this URL. I'm going to head over back to my article. I'm going to say image. And for my source, I'm just going to pass it right now like it is with this number 65. However, I can tell you that this is going to be where we're going to be changing dynamically. Okay. Now what do we have? So we have the alt. And then within the alternative, let's say person image, that's going to be our name. So far we have the image. Obviously nothing is showing right now because we haven't rendered anything. And what else we would like for the person? Well, we're going to go with some kind of name. So there's going to be name. We're going to copy and paste it. Another heading for job. I'll just write like this, even though eventually this is going to be occupation. And you know what? We can just leave it at this right now because obviously the last one is going to be children and we're not going to be dealing with children right now. So let's say right now that in my person list, I will going to be looking for my person. So I'm going to say that within the section, I'm going to be looking for my person. The moment we save it, this is going to be my person. And this is obviously the number that I'm getting. So let's say I'm going to have 61, then the image is going to be different the moment we're going to actually save it. So let me save it. And now obviously my image is different. So that would be my first person. However, what I would like to have is something more dynamic where I'm passing some kind of values here in our props, and then they're being rendered within our component. So why don't we do that? Why don't we say that there's going to be some kind of generic person? And like I said, with images, what we're going to do is we're just going to control them dynamically. So this number, as this is going to be changing, then we're going to be rendering different image. So for now, I know that, okay, so for person, I would like to, first of all, pass some kind of image. And I'm going to say that this is going to be number of, let's say 34, which you can pass all kinds of numbers. I don't know what kind of specifics they have. Is it either this is like 1 to 100 or something like this. So I don't know if you're going to pass like 3 million, whether this is going to work. But as far as if you are being normal about it, meaning that if you're using some kind of normal number, not some negative or something like that, this should work. However, I don't know the limits of them. Again, this is just an example. So please don't hold me accountable. So let's say I'm going to say image number 34. I'm going to be passing. Then I'm going to say name is going to be John for my first one. So John, as well as I'm going to be looking for job or application. So let's say job is going to be, again, developer. That would be my job. And for now, we're just going to leave it at this. Of course, nothing is changing because we're not accessing these props. So everything stays the same because we have at the moment hard coded everything. However, we know that if we want to destructure the props, we just need to destructure them. I can go the long way and we can do the console log and look at the props. I don't know, maybe that would help. You know what? Yeah, this is just going to take me 30 seconds, but it might help somebody to understand everything clearly. So let's write props. However, we need to be looking for those props, of course. So I'm going to write props. So I'm destructuring the props. or I'm sorry, not destructuring. I'm just accessing the props. And then I'm going to say inspect. And again, we're going to be looking for the console. Then it looks here for redundant attribute. So we might as well get rid of this image because it basically complains that, yeah, you're adding the image, but there was no point for this image. So let me save it. Now we're going to not have this warning. However, I do see my props. I see the image, I see the John, as well as I see the developer. Awesome. So why don't we do the structuring like we already learned before, where we had the actual parentheses, and then I'm looking for the image, then I'm looking for the name, as well as what I have. I have the job, and eventually I know that there is going to be children. I don't have any at the moment, but I know that it will going to be eventually. So I can get rid of the props, and here let's start passing these values. So let's start with a name and job because this is going to be a little bit funky because we're going to have to change the syntax around a little bit. And let's say here that we're going to be looking for our name. That's going to be my dynamic attribute. And then we're going to be looking for the job. That's going to be my second. And now let me just save it. So here I have John developer. And why don't we copy and paste it? Let's say 1 and 2. And we're going to change these values around. So this is going to be 22. This is going to be like, I don't know, 56. Again, some random numbers as long as they are not 3 million. And here we can write Bob. And let's say for the last one, this is going to be David. And what would be the professions? I don't know. So far, maybe we can delete few of them. Again, let's delete both of these guys. Let's say that the value is going to be for the last one, the boss. And then for the second one, I'm going to have, I don't know, designer. I think that should do. Awesome. So I have 3 of them. Then these values are changing. However, the picture stays the same, even though we passed here the image. Okay. Why is this happening? Because we are, again, accessing the image for the source with the same URL. Nothing is changing. However, how do we access the variables in the JavaScript? One of the ways in the strings. Well, that could be template literals that comes with ES6. However, here we would need to change from the quotation marks to a template literal. So I would need to do something like this, where I have one template literal and the other one. However, remember that you are working right now in the JSX. So this is not going to make sense right now. So instead of doing something like this, where we're trying to pass the value, we need to set up some kind of variable. So in my case, I'm going to say const. I'm going to be looking for URL, and then I'm going to grab everything that I have here with my template literal. So I'm going to set this equal to my template literal. So now I'm going to be able to access the dynamic values. However, here I'm going to go back and I'm going to say source, and source is going to be my URL. So that would be my variable. You technically could have written here, obviously, this the same way, where we had the template literal, we pass it here, and then we're changing this. However, just to kind of give you a clearer understanding of what's happening, I kind of separate it as a separate value. And here, since this right now is a template literal, I can do something like this. I can say whatever image I'm going to be passing, that value I'm going to be accessing. So the moment I'm going to save it, now the values are going to be different because obviously now I'm accessing dynamic value. And again, just to show you that it will work the same way, since we are working here in the JSX, let me just copy this. And I hope I copied everything. No, I actually did the actual command Z, which would be undoing. So let me copy this. And once we copy and paste it, you should see that everything is going to be still working fine. And the only thing that at the moment we're not using the URL. So the key here is that if you want to use the template literals, we need to be careful because this would be JSX. However, I do find this a little bit more understandable where we have the separate URL. You definitely can do it this way. It's fine. But I just find that setting up that separate variable just kind of helps, especially as we're just doing the project that's being recorded for the screencast. Okay, so we have our URL. Now, what would be our last thing that we're looking for? And that would be the children. So I would need to decide where I would want the children. So I'm going to say here, okay, so the children are going to be rendered here which obviously we already accessed them within the props. And then from one of them, I do need to pass some kind of children. So let's say for the guy number 2, we're going to say that we would want to close the person. And then here we would want some kind of paragraph. Paragraph is going to have, I don't know, lorem 20, or no, maybe that's too much, a little bit drastic, and lorem 10. And once we're going to save it, obviously the paragraph that's going to be for the second person is going to be rendered, but because we are having these children right here. So that would be our JavaScript. That would be our React. So why don't we go ahead and start styling? Now for the styling, I would need to implement, first of all, the index CSS, and I would need to get it in the index.js. So for this, we're going to say import, and we're going to be looking for index CSS. However, remember that this was not importing from our dependencies. This was importing from our actual folder. So in this case, we're going to write index. Then we're looking for CSS because we need to have the full value. And right off the bat, I'm going to add right away the classes that I'm going to be using for styling. So for this guy, for the person, I'm going to say class. Name is going to be person, as well as for the person list, we're going to add another class name. So there's going to be class name of person list. We're going to save them both, and we're going to head over back to index CSS and start styling everything like we would want. Styling might actually take a little bit longer. I don't know. But in order to make this half-what decent, we do need to do a little bit of styling. So let's say here we're going to be selecting all the elements. We're going to first get rid of all the browser default styles. So here we're going to write margin is going to be, let's say, 0. So right off the bat, get rid of those. Then we're going to have some padding as well. 0 box sizing is going to be equal to box sizing. Let's say border box. And again, the reason for the border box would be the fact that as we're going to be adding the paddings to our components or elements, or elements, I guess, we were going to be getting rid of the fact that they would grow bigger in size. So that way the padding would be applied to the element, and then the element is not going to be bigger. Then we can also say everything for the body, some kind of font family. And for font family, I'm just going to go with Verdana. I think this is going to look nicer. So something like this. Now everything is working. I have my fonts. And then let's start styling the person. So for the person, I'm going to say that the background is going to be, I don't know, EEE. So hashtag EEE. That would be my background for the persons. Then I would like to set up some kind of width. So I'm going to say width is going to be 17 REMs, as well as I'm going to do some padding. And the padding is going to be 1 REM, 1 REM all around. And now this would be my width, as well as we have a little bit of padding all around. I also would like to add a little bit of margin. So let's write, in this case, 2 REMs, margin top bottom, and left and right auto. So what happens right now, our person is going to be exactly in the center because we did add the width and we used margin auto to place it in the center. Also, I would like to have a little bit of border radius. Border radius is going to be 0.3 REMs. So now we're going to have some rounded edges. Also, text align is going to be in center because I would like my text in the center, as well as, you know what, I would like to add some hovering effect. So I'm going to say person. So as we're hovering over the person, I would like to have, I don't know. Well, first of all, I would need to target class. Otherwise, this is not going to work. And I'm going to say, as I'm hovering over this component or element, however you would call it, I would like to add a little bit of box shadow. So I'm going to say box shadow, just so we have some shadow. As well as for the box shadow, let's say 2 pixels X direction, 5 pixels Y direction, 10 pixels blur. And let's say what the color is going to be 000 RGBA. So that would be the black one. And with 0.3 opacity. Let me save it. However, the change is happening instantly. So why don't we add right away also the transitioning? So we're going to say here for transition for the person, and we're going to be looking for the values of all. So all the properties that are going to be affected. This should take 0.3 seconds, and the transition should be linear. As I'm hovering right now, as you can see, the change is happening not instantly, but with a transitioning effect. Awesome. After that, I would like to style the image. So I'm going to say person, and then I'm going to be targeting the image. And from the image, we're going to go very simply with border radius. We will going to have 50%. So this is going to be round. Then we're going to be looking for some border. Let's say border would be, I don't know, 0.1 rem solid. And then let's look for the teal color. That's how our images are going to look like, as well as we can attack the heading 4, which we have right here. So that would be our heading 4. And for this, we're going to say person heading 4. And for that, we can do text transform, maybe text transform, capitalize. So let's capitalize the text for all the headings 4s. Let's add a little bit of margin top bottom. So margin 0.5 REMs and left and right 0. That's going to add a nice margin. We can also do letter spacing. So there's some spacing in between the letters. 0.15 REMs, something like this, as well as, you know what, color we can also do teal, just because I think it's going to look a little bit nicer. And then last but not least, I would like to work with the media screen, because I would like to have the same effect that we're having right now, where the moment we get to the bigger screen, this is going to look like this, where we have 3-column layout. However, the moment we have the 2-column layout, that would be at around 768. And then on a smaller screen, this would be a 1-column layout. So it would look something like this. So why don't we do that? So that would be our last rule that we're going to be writing. And for this, we're going to use media queries again, media screen, and that would be the rule min width. So in this case, we're going to say that starting from 768, the person list. Remember, we had 2 classes. We had one for the person, and then we had a person list. So now we're going to be styling this person list, because this is where all our components are meeting anyway. So in this case, I'm going to say, okay, so starting from that, we will going to have the person list. So the class person list, and here, let's say display grid. So starting from 768, display grid, then we would want some grid template columns, just so we would have some columns, grid template columns. And here, let's say that starting from 768, there's going to be 2 equally sized columns, equal sized columns, as well as a little bit of grid gap. And that would be the gap in between the columns as well as rows. And for this, we're going to have 1 REM. I'm going to save it. Nothing is going to change at the moment, because the last thing that I would want is 992. And then we're going to check it out on a bigger browser window anyway. So in this case, we're going to say person, and then we're going to be looking for person list. And you know what? No, this is not what I wanted. I apologize. So what I would want right now is copy and paste this, and we're going to set up the different media. So starting from 992, I would want still display grid. So I don't have to override this, since I already have starting from 768 display grid. So this is still going to keep it, as well as I'm going to keep the same grid gap. However, for the columns, since I would want 3-column layout, I'm going to use the repeat function. And then for repeat function, I'm going to say how many times this is going to be repeating, since this is going to be, again, 3 columns. And then we're going to write 1 fraction. This is going to be our setup. And then once I go back to the bigger screen or to the bigger browser window, I know that I can be looking for not localhost 8000 board for 3000. And this is going to give me my project. And if you see that at the moment, this has a React app, but if you want to make sure that this is for sure your project, we can head over back to the public, and we can write not React app. Let's write person list. So that would be our name. The moment I'm going to save it, notice this is going to be my person list, and this is going to be my final project. And then as I make my screen size bigger, then I have 2-column layout, as well as then we have a 3-column layout. And at this point, we can congratulate ourselves, because we have finished successfully our first project. We are rendering the list of people in a person list, and depending on the screen size, this is going to be changing, as well as we are passing in the dynamic values using the props.